Blood Elves made their debut in Warcraft 3 expansion, The Frozen Throne, and pretty much in that story we saw the High Elves were in pretty bad shape since their homeland had been destroyed by the Undead Scourge, and their leader at the time, Prince Kael'thas, rose up to figure out a way of how to cure his people of their magical addiction, and his solution to that was pretty much enslaving his people to the demon Illidan, who in turn for their service promised to teach them how to sate their magical addiction and become very powerful.
I think it's interesting to note about the Blood Elves that they have a rich history in Warcraft lore. They used to be High Elves, and High Elves were part of the Alliance. If you played Warcraft 3, your sorcerers and priests were High Elves. So it's interesting to see them on the other faction at this point. It's also interesting to note that Lady Sylvanas Windrunner was once a High Elf and therefore a Blood Elf, and she's on the Forsaken now. After she regained her will from Arthas, she led the Forsaken Crusade, and now you've got the Blood Elves naturally allied with the Horde through Lady Sylvanas Windrunner. So I think there's some really interesting story elements going on there.
In the Burning Crusade expansion set, we see the Blood Elves, a few years later, have indeed embraced Illidan's path and become very powerful, but they've definitely lost their souls, and that's a major theme that plays out through the quest lines.
What we tried to do with the quests was naturally guide the player through Blood Elf lore and catch the player up with why are the Blood Elves here, why are they on the Horde, why is it important for this expansion, the Burning Crusade, to have Blood Elves involved. Some of the earliest quests for the Blood Elves, for example, involve using the racial ability.
Every race in our game has some specific racial abilities that sort of make that class, that race unique. What we did with the Blood Elves is we focused on the kind of vibe that we've built for them, that they're this race that's very addicted to magic, that they can't get enough of it. So both in selecting primarily classes that are mana-oriented classes, and then by also selecting racial abilities that emphasize magic. For example, the mana tap ability that all Blood Elves have that allows them to kind of sap mana from the target and also build up a little bit of a buff that leads into their next ability, which is Arcane Torrent. And Arcane Torrent kind of sucks all the magic in the area around them, silencing nearby targets, and kind of restores some energy or some mana for that character. So what we've done is we've tried to focus on abilities that reinforce those themes that we've developed for the Blood Elves.
Blood Elf Paladin was quite an interesting one to talk about, in terms of lore especially. So they refer to themselves as Blood Knights, even though they are paladins. They cannot embrace the light. Rather, they see the light as this thing for them to manipulate.
We thought the game would play a lot better at the highest ends if that class option was available for the Horde. So as we sat around trying to figure out, well, this is certainly a break in the lore, how the hell are we going to rationalize this one? We came up with a pretty cool hook, which was Blood Elves overall kind of lost their faith in the light following the events of Warcraft 3. The undead had ruled their kingdom, and the light wasn't there for them in their darkest hour. It was, but they didn't use it very well. And so in their bitterness, they kind of turned from the light, and the prospect of them stealing the light or bending it to their will really meshed with their kit.
Their personality really fit that faction, kind of cursed on the inside. But at the same time, they're relatively, attractive race. At a glance, they kind of might not look like they fit on there, but when you play the game and you get into their quests and their story, and you start seeing more of their emotes and sort of the subtleties of the race, you'll really see that, yeah, they obviously fit on the Horde.
A lot of the High Elf architecture, as we understand it, was held together by magic. The High Elves, or the Blood Elves, as we see them now, are dependent on, their whole culture is dependent on magic. And the Sunwell was the source of that magic, and when the Sunwell was destroyed, the architecture that was being held together by this magic started to fall apart. So part of their main city, Silvermoon, half of it is completely abandoned and run down because there's no more magic left to hold these buildings into place. and the buildings that they have taken over and remain standing in pristine order, they're using demonic energies to maintain the architectural structures.
The Blood Elf exterior zones are very unique because they're the first exterior zones that we built for the expansion. So we were learning some lessons along the way, but I think that we tried to do a pretty good job in making something different for players than they've experienced before. And the main thing about that stands out is Silverman City. Silverman City is the home city for the Blood Elf race, so the Horde was finally able to get its giant grand city.
So Silvermoon City is a great example of one of these areas. It has the pristine area which the Blood Elves have been rebuilding and was untouched from Arthas. There's the dead scar that goes right through the center of the city and is complete and utter devastation. Then the ruins of Silvermoon, which have been abandoned, they got cut off by the Scourge. So they haven't bothered to rebuild that. They just moved everybody over to the pristine side.
We decided to take one half and make it the city proper, and take the other half and turn it into what we call like a sub-zone, which is a small area that we expect players to quest and adventure in. And that's where we send players on early in the game. So they go through there, they play a couple quests, and then they exit out into the rest of Eversong, which would be the rest of the actual Blood Elf zone. Well, Sunstrider Isle plays a pretty big history into the Blood Elves because originally they've been there for a long time, but they've been pushed there. Originally they were out over the rest of Eversong, a little bit of the Ghostlands, but over time they've been oppressed and pushed back. So for us, it always works out really great to have a small starting area because we can keep the players, not necessarily enclosed, but we can keep them where we want for quests. And for a lot of people who are just learning how to play the game. They're level 1, they're level 3, so tend to not want them to get too far off a road or get stuck in a dungeon they might not want to be in. So doing an island like that that's connected right off the edge of the coast plays really well to that aspect for us.
For the Blood Elf outfits, we wanted to pull from some of the same designs that are prevalent in the rest of their environments. A lot of their designs are really regal and pretty. There's a lot of gold, intricate filigree, and a lot of primary colors, reds, purples.
The main influences with the Blood Elf items and weapons would be kind of similar to what their outfits were, which was that they're these very kind of like supermodel type people and more of a clean race. So taking that sort of thing into consideration would be just, the color scheme, the warm color scheme, the things that kind of key into that character type. They're very much like a red and a gold color scheme, like kind of red bases with gold accents. So we always want to kind of hammer that home and make sure that that's a very primary part of what makes up their weapons and all the stuff.
We're trying to kind of make it seem like the Blood Elves are the evolution of Night Elves. They are, the step up. They've kind of evolved. They were, in love with magic, and they had this lust for magic. So they kind of shied away more from the traditional Night Elf feel. So the differences are, they are definitely a lot more dynamic. Maybe not very gymnast or very flowing. But a lot more stronger looking in terms of posing, and their posture, their silhouettes, are definitely strike a little bit more dynamic feel to me. They're definitely more humanoid looking. They don't really have any dangly parts or holes in their faces or huge horns or anything. A lot of people who like the aesthetics and the look of the Night Elves will definitely like the Blood Elves.
Yeah, the dance is pretty obvious, I think. The animators kind of surprised all of us with that one.
The male dance, we did Napoleon Dynamite, and in the movie Napoleon Dynamite, there's a scene where Napoleon does a really funky dance routine on stage in front of his high school. So we picked 4 or 5 routines or steps out of that and created the animations from it. The Blood Elf female, we're playing with the idea of a kind of pop culture dance. So we took Britney Spears videos and kind of picked apart steps from several of her videos.
What I hope for the player to take away from the Blood Elf experience is a sense of identity.
Am I evil or am I a good race? Because I think we kind of leave it on the edge there.
The sense of identity for being a Horde character, but a very different Horde character from what they've previously known. Completely different from any kind of Alliance character, because again, the race is a pretty race. They're all beautiful. The women and men of the Blood Elves are beautiful races, beautiful creatures, but there's more to them than that. Who are you? What are you? What do you want?